Hello, this is J-Rod. This is my channel, all the above. Please enjoy. Thank you. Alright, it's official. We got the new Bykski water block. We are basically going to do an open box for the 3090 EVGA for the Win 3 Ultra. So we will break it down, show all the parts that are listed and in the box, and then we will do a tutorial and go through how to install the Bykski 3090 EVG for the Win 3 water block. Now these are always fun tutorials. The instructions for something that comes out of China ain't the greatest. So basically, you know, we do it ourselves. We go through it. We make sure that we cover every end to make sure that this water block is fully installed correctly. We do our research. We make sure that the block has contact with the thermal pads. I know on this block it's a little different than the typical blocks where they already got the thermal pads on there and it's already ready to go. This one's not the case. So when you're installing this one, you got to double check. You got to make sure that it's having contact with these blocks or it won't cool your GPU down. So the best scenario I've come with is you cannot use the thermal pad that this block comes with. 1 millimeter was the best size that I've used on this block in order to get full contact with my thermal pad in my block. Now add some putty to that, thermal putty, and it'll allow you to see the contact, so you can put your pads down, your 1 millimeter down on your block, and then put a little bit of putty on the top of those, and then you can push your block down on the GPU, and then you could see the contact that it gives you and each area where it is needed. This so far has been the best solution that I've found with this block. And again, we're doing this together, so if somebody has a better solution in order to get full contact on this entire block, leave it down in the comments. I mean, that's what we're doing here. I mean, basically, that's what this is for. This is basically, we're doing this together. And if there's a better avenue to get this GPU and this block to have 100% contact with no issues, you know, we learn, we improve, we get better temperatures. That's the name of the game here. We want low temperatures. Not only do we want low temperatures for the GPU and the memory, we also want low temperatures for the VRAM, because if everybody knows, this is kind of the reason, the main seller of why we get the Bykski. It's because it's a dual block and it allows us to cool down our VRAM, which is really great. I mean, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what we want, because the 3080s and the 3090s, the GPU itself doesn't get that hot. When you're ramping up this GPU and you're mining, because that's what I use it for, or studio editing, that VRAM gets entirely too hot, and then next thing you know, you're thermal throttling. That is what we're trying to avoid here by adding the water to the block. I've looked, and for EVGA for the Win 3 Ultra 3090, there ain't a lot of active backplates to be offered. I know there's a couple, but for the price, it's the best. Bykski's the best. I mean, you're paying a fraction of what you're gonna pay buying it the other way. And now, yeah, I know that it's kind of went up a little bit in cost, but in the same sense, Bykski wins. Bykski wins. We'll leave it at that. Alright, let's get started on this. So the first thing you're going to do is 1 millimeter. That's what I'm using. And I've tried it the other way. And I'm telling you, the 1.5 or the 1.8, I think they give you, according to the instructions, will not work. It's too much of a thermal pad. You do not get contact using it. So basically 1 millimeter on all of it. And then whatever you have the gap on, the rest, me personally, I use this putty right here. The putty works great. You know, if you're off a little bit, it's going to allow that contact. It's going to allow the heat to go up and absorb into the box wherever the thermal pads are failing at. So me personally, I paint it on there. Some people like to get a little messy and dirty. I get a little paintbrush and paint it on there. Now on this water block, it does not cool the choke. Actively, it does not cool it. This water block is basically designed to not even land on the active plate for the choke. So personally, I think the putty works, and basically if you load it on there and then you apply your thermal pads to the locations needed, as long as it touches the block and the GPU where it's designed to touch, it's gonna cool it down. The next step is you're gonna put thermal paste on the chip, and as you can see, I apply it with the paintbrush. You can do it with the little putty knife, you can do it with your finger. As long as you apply an even coat over the chip and it has contact with the block, you should be good to go. Okay, perfect. We applied the thermal paste and we're going to put our thermal pads on now. And all your pieces should be cut down to size. You should be able to cut it to the exact size that needs to be cut. You just kind of put it on there, you fit it to it, and then you just adjust it. If you got to cut a little shorter, you put it down. But I am using 1 millimeter for this water block. I know it came with thicker pads. They don't work. I've tried it. They just don't work. So we went over this. I'm just reiterating and letting everybody know that they will not work. 1 millimeter is the key here. So after I install my thermal pads, I do add some more thermal putty, and I add it to both sides. And this was the side that we discussed, that the inside of this part does touch the active plate, but the chokes don't. So I kind of put the thermal pad on there with the thermal putty, hoping maybe that it'll allow it to get a little bit of contact and pull some of the heat over that does touch the active plate. So you just cut these down to size and you put the rest of your thermal putty on. These are the memory chips, and we want to make sure that they're cut to size, so when you do put that block on, it allows it to fit correctly. You don't want it to be all cut, jagged and stuff. You can see through the block when you pick up the actual GPU. You want them to be fine line cut. You want it to look halfway decent too. So another good trick that works is after you have all these thermal pads placed on your GPU and you go to take the water block and push it together, you want to make sure that in all them locations where you have the thermal pad that it's touching the water block. This is the way that it allows it to cool down. Well, another way you can do this too is you can add thermal putty to the top of all of it, and then when you press your water block down on it, you know that it's actively touching the thermal pads. So you know that it has contact where it needs to have contact with. It's really a good way to know that your water block and your thermal pads and your GPU has correct contact in all locations, because we went over this, and even for me, this was a new water block and not like a regular easy water block with thermal pads already installed. We want to make sure 100% that we're not going to burn our card up, that our thermal pads, our water block, our GPU has contact. This is how this card cools down. It's the only way it cools down. And the thermal putty on top of the thermal pads will allow you to know that this has direct contact. So basically, this is probably the most important part of installing this, is when you put this GPU on the water block, you want to look inside and you want to see if it has contact. Now, sometimes you can't see all the way down, so lift your card, make sure that you can see your thermal paste, make sure that it looks like it has been squashed down and has a little bit of pressure on it, that there is contact on this water block. It's the most important thing. You have to make sure that this water block has contact. I know that I went around in a circle with this, but if you put this whole thing together and it doesn't have contact in all them design spots, it's not going to cool down. It will not cool down. So we look good here. We're good to go. Like I said, the 1mm did work. And then adding a little bit of thermal putty, just a little bit of extra. And now, pro tip on this Bykski, if you're not familiar with it and you're moving it around a lot, the LED lights on the bottom of this Bykski water block, they're very fragile. They're soldered on and they can break real easily. So me personally, I took the 2 screws out and then took that actually off so I wouldn't have an issue with busting the LEDs on the water block. You don't have to do it, it's not required, but it makes it easier to not mess that up. Okay, in order to install the first part of the water block, you're going to need 4 screws. The 4 screws that you use, they come with 4 washers and they come with 4 springs. Now, in order to do this part, you're going to want to screw in one side just a little bit. Don't screw it down. Don't tighten it down all the way. You're going to screw it in just enough for it to grab it, and then you're going to move yourself around. Me, I go in a cross shape. You can do crisscross. You can do kind of like you're putting a tire on. But that's kind of the same way as how you're going to tighten it down also. You're going to kind of go around in a clockwise motion and you're going to tighten it down around in a circle. Now, me personally, I don't tighten nothing down until I have them all in. It just makes it easier. It's always been a rule of thumb with me, and it's always worked to my advantage. So same with this. Crisscross it, tighten it down, and as you can see now that I've got them all in, I'm going to tighten them all down to my best of my ability. Don't wrench them down to where you snap your board. Obviously, that's common sense, but you do want them tight enough to where it pulls that water block into the thermal pads and makes direct contact. That's the key. Alright, moving along. The back active plate is a lot easier than the front. It's kind of cut and dry. You've got a few locations where you need thermal pad. On this, I used the stock thermal pad, and I did have complete contact with the active plate block on this situation. So yeah, you can use the ones that came in the box with this. It worked out fine. Now on the actual VRAM memory, I took little teeny pieces of, I think it was 0.5, and I just put it on there to give it a little bit of an extra, and it will have contact with the block itself when installing it. So I also added a couple little extra thermal pads. There was a few little pieces on there that it seemed feasible to add it on there, and it does have contact with the block, so hopefully that does help out cool down whatever needs to be cooled down. It's not necessary, it's just extra. So for the next part of this, so like anything, check your work. You can pretty much lift the GPU up and make sure that your thermal pads are direct contact of the block. This is what cools it down. It's going to go with the same rule of thumb. When applying these screws, you do not tighten this down. You put the screws in accordingly, and then once you've got all the screws in, then you tighten it down. So we'll just follow in suit. As you can see, all your screw holes should line up. If you got the correct water block for the correct GPU, your screws will line up. Don't force screws in to a water block that don't line up. Obviously, somewhere along the line, they either sent you the wrong one, or you ordered the wrong one, or there was a defect. But in this case, every single screw lines up. That's how you know that you're good to go. So in a clockwise motion, you are going to add each screw that lines up. Remember, accordingly, the screws need to line up. If they do not, there's bigger issues. So let's check it, let's make sure, let's look at it, and yeah, they do line up. So we put all the screws in. We do not tighten them down. I repeat, do not tighten them down. Everything gets tightened down at the end. And a lot of people run into this issue of, why isn't my block going together? Why isn't, this working? Well, because you tighten something down too much, and it's allowing not the other end to tighten down. So you want to put each screw in, thread it down just enough to where it catches one of the threads, then you go around and tighten it. So this is the part why we said do not tighten it down. So we're going to add to the water block the dual connection and basically install this bridge, and it just joins both of them together. But again, in order to join this together, when you put the back plate on, the active back plate on, you put your screws in, you do not tighten them down all the way, you just put them in enough to thread. Now you put this top bridge on there to join the GPU together, and you tighten those ones down. So after you get that top piece on and you put the 6 screws, it's got 2 long ones and then 4 shorter ones, then obviously the long 2. You're going to tighten those down. And I do it in a manner of counterclockwise, always works. So tighten them down, going around in a circle counterclockwise. So this is perfect. If you tighten down the back plate before you tighten down this water block bridge, it will be almost impossible to get it together, or you have a chance of stripping out the screws. So ideally we're looking at this top bridge head modular. According to the instructions, let's tighten this down first. Then we go back to the active back plate and we just go around in counterclockwise and tighten that down. Okay, perfect. Now that we've gotten all the screws in, we just go around the whole GPU and we make sure everything is tight, everything is snug. Now you can kind of do it in like a cross pattern, or you can do it in a counterclockwise manner, but you don't want to normally do it right next to each other when you tighten it down. Just tighten it down kind of evenly throughout the whole GPU, and you just go around in a circle. And so there it is, folks. My name is J-Rod and this is my channel, All the Above. If there's any questions, leave comments, and if anybody's got some good information that maybe I missed in my video, leave comments for that too. We can always learn from each other. Thanks and God bless. Please subscribe and like to my channel. Every little bit helps, and this is a new channel, so we're trying to build it up. So please subscribe. Thank you. The nice 3090 Bykski water block. There it is. There it is.